Good afternoon and welcome to the Preservation Association of Lincoln Brown Bag Lecture Series. My name's Eileen Burke and I'm the coordinator of this brown bag. The Preservation Association of Lincoln is sponsoring today's taping. Our speakers today are K. Logan-Peters and Vance Behrens. K. Logan-Peters is retired from serving as the architectural librarian for the university libraries at UNL for over 40 years. Kay received a bachelor's degree from UNL and a master's degree from the University of Missouri. She spent 25 years researching the history of the university, initially interested in university buildings and campus expansion. She also has developed a website devoted to the physical history and development of the campuses. In August of 17, she wrote a book, The University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and it was published as part of the Acadia Publishing Campus History Series using photographs from the university archives. Vance Behrens is our other speaker, and he's the owner and president of Structural Design Group in Lincoln. He has a bachelor's degree in architecture and a master's degree in civil engineering from UNL, and he is a registered structural engineer. The talk today is titled Mueller Tower, Past and Present. Kay will start the talk with the history of Mueller Tower, and Vance will talk about the current work on the tower. Please join me in welcoming Kay and Vance.
Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon now. I'm going to try not to talk too long about Ralph Mueller and his history at the university, his career, how he made his money, and how he ended up becoming a benefactor to the university, and in particular to Mueller Tower. That's why it's named Mueller Tower. My first slide here is an image of campus that shows where Mueller Tower is located. I'm sure most of you know Mueller Tower. It is sort of an iconic building on the university campus. But it's on the mall, just east of the stadium, west of what would be the new College of Business, which you can't hardly miss because it's very large. And it has been there since 1949. Get myself organized here. This is young Ralph as an undergraduate at the university. Ralph was born in Council Bluffs in 1877. His father was a German immigrant who sort of by accident wound up in Council Bluffs because he was going to Pikes Peak to find gold, and the wagon train he was riding with kind of fell apart. He stayed in Council Bluffs. It was 1859. Council Bluffs was pretty raw. The nearest post office was 100 miles away. So he was very much a resourceful person and a pioneer. And he married the local school teacher, who was from New England stock, and together they raised 5 children, and Ralph was right in the middle of the kids. His father was very, very musical, and he ended up opening a music store. So the first piano in Council Bluffs was brought to town by Mr. Mueller. It had to be, shipped up the river, and Council Bluffs was kind of a booming place, almost a competitor to St. Joe as a jumping off spot. So he became fairly prosperous, and the music store was sort of the cultural hub of Council Bluffs. The whole family was musical. And Ralph arrived in Lincoln with a small trunk and a violin and was musical for the rest of his life. This photo was taken while he was, when he was a senior at the university. He came to UNL because they offered him a spot with no tuition, which is pretty interesting since he was not a Nebraska resident. But the university at that time didn't have a structure for charging tuition because there was no tuition, even for out-of-state students. And he was valedictorian of his high school class, so he was probably pretty bright, and they thought, why not? He paid a $5 matriculation fee and came to Lincoln in 1894 and graduated in 1898. he received a Bachelor of Science, but his interest by the time he was about halfway through school was electrical engineering. So he took as many electrical engineering courses as he could. I don't know if his degree was in a Bachelor of Science because they didn't technically offer a degree in electrical engineering, or if he had already invested too many hours in other things and just wanted to be done with school. After he graduated, he was a very poor student. He had even more jobs as a student than I did. And ultimately one of his jobs was serving as the electrician's assistant. And his job was to go around replacing light bulbs and trimming arc lamps. And I got the feeling, he wrote an autobiography, and I got the feeling from the way he described it that light bulbs were much more complicated in 1898 than they are now. I don't think you just screwed in a light bulb. The filaments were delicate, and getting them into the lamps was more complicated. So he worked one summer for a carpenter and wired a house. And so then he felt like he had mastered electricity, but he decided that he needed to know a little bit more about the kind of science behind electricity. So after he graduated, he came back and spent another semester taking everything he could on electricity and electrical engineering. He was a very ambitious person without being an obnoxiously ambitious person. He was very, I think, engaged at UNL. He belonged to many clubs. He was very resourceful. I think that's the word that describes him best. And he never let an opportunity pass. Every time he learned something new or heard about something new, he followed up on it and ultimately became wealthy because of that character trait. I like this picture because he tells a story in his autobiography that the center part became very stylish when he was an undergraduate, so he parted his hair in the center. But when he went home to Council Bluffs, all the working men teased him and told him he looked like a dandy, so he would part his hair on the side in Iowa and part his hair in the middle in Lincoln. Ralph pledged a fraternity, Phi Delta Theta. He's in there. His photo is in there, although right now I can't tell you which one. He used his fraternity connections to his advantage for most of his life, and made many business connections through his fraternity and really enjoyed that. According to the yearbook, he was a member of the football team. He was a right tackle his junior year and a left tackle his senior year, although his biography does not mention anything about football. He boxed. He learned to box from a man named Jack Best, who is a UNL legend. He was the athletic trainer. He was on campus for probably 40 years. He was British, and he taught him how to fight, and that came in handy when he worked for the railroad and was sent up to Deadwood to lay tracks one summer when he was an undergraduate. So he was involved in a lot of things. He was involved in Glee Club. I'll go back to this. He was a singer. He did all kinds of musical reviews with his fraternity. He never really left that musical side of his life behind, and it worked to his advantage. Eventually, Ralph, after he finishes his extra semester, he takes a job. I might need my notes here. He takes a job he's interested in telephone technology. That seemed to be a very booming field. Bell Labs had kind of locked everything down, but a lot of new independent telephone companies were forming. So initially he went to work for Western Electric in what we would think of now as a factory job putting together switchboards. But he learned how switchboards worked, and he learned how the telephone industry was built. And he did that for a while, and he felt like he'd learned as much as he could. So the next year, he went to Chicago well, he was working for Western Electric in Chicago. He switched to a company called Sawyer Mann as a salesman. And he was kind of a natural salesman. I think he was probably pretty gregarious. He was young and single. He didn't mind the travel. And he covered the country selling light bulbs, which seems sort of, now we go to Westlake and we grab a 4-pack of light bulbs, but it was apparently a more complicated undertaking. So he sold light bulbs for a while for the Sawyer Mann Company, but they had a lousy product. And I think eventually he realized, I don't want to work for these people because what I'm selling isn't really very good quality. So in 1902, he moved to a company called Kellogg Switchboard and Supply. And they were probably the biggest marketer of telephone equipment after Bell Telephone. Bell was backed up. If you wanted a switchboard from Bell, you'd have to wait a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So there was a lot of opportunity for these new, smaller telephone companies to form. So he went to work for Kellogg, and he did very well. He traveled all the time. He eventually was promoted to a spot in Philadelphia and was running the Kellogg branch in that part of the state, in that part of the country, really. And he did very well. The older gentleman that had been his boss retired. He expected to get that job. His sales were higher than anyone else in the company, and it was just sort of a given. But instead it was given to a faculty member that Kellogg had wooed away from maybe Case Western, which is in Cleveland. And they wooed him away from his teaching position, didn't know what to do with him, and they gave him the job that Mueller fairly thought that should have gone to him. So he was disgruntled, and he went out on his own. He married when he was in Philadelphia. He met his wife. She was a Pennsylvanian. He married, and then they were sent to Cleveland, and that was when the promotion issue came up. So he was disgruntled. He decided, I can sell things without Kellogg being my overlord. So he had manufacturers that he represented, and he did this selling electrical parts and telephone parts for many, many, many years. And he was very successful. He was a great salesman, but he got tired of traveling. So in 1908, he decided he would go out on his own with these manufacturers that he represented. And he rented a building where he met a man named George Dusenberry. And Dusenberry was older than Mueller. He was kind of a tinkerer, and he had kind of a checkered work history, but he did have an electrical background as well. But he was kind of hard to nail down. But they both rented office space in a building called the Electric Building. And he was self-employed this way until 1921. In 1907, he met a sort of odd young guy who had invented a clip that he knew would be handy for people working in the telephone industry. And so he formed a company with this young guy. His name was Williams, and 3 other people. They each threw in $200, and they formed this company. And then they went out to get these clips manufactured, and they were too expensive. It cost too much to make them for the company to really make any money. So the next year, so he suggested to this group of investors that they should simplify the clip. And this inventor, Williams, was so indignant that he stormed into Mueller's office and demanded to buy him out. Mueller said, fine, wrote him a $200 check and got out of that business, and then had a conversation with Dusenberry about what had happened and the clip. And Dusenberry thought for a minute, folded up a business card, cut it into a shape and made a little model of an alligator clip. And together they decided this is what we'll build and market, because there was a need for it. And it was a much simpler device than, well, I should show the clip. This is the clip we all know that's marketed today. These things are ubiquitous. You see them every time you go to the dentist and they hook on your bib. That's an alligator clip. But they're used for many, many things. So anyway, this is kind of the clip that George Duesenberry made out of a business card in 1908. So they worked on it, they perfected it, they came up with an insulated version. In 1910, Duesenberry applied for a patent, and he expected Mueller to be the co-owner of the patent with him. And Mueller said, no, you thought up that clip, you can have the patent, but we'll put the company in my name. So they started a company, R.S. Mueller Manufacturing, and they went along for about 10 years. Meanwhile, Mueller is still doing his real job, his full-time job, selling electrical supplies for this group of manufacturers that he had these relationships with. Duesenberry drove Mueller crazy because he always had an idea and rarely acted on it more than just to get it going. He was kind of a dreamer. So finally, the clips were a side business, but it was growing. So Mueller decided to buy out Duesenberry. He tried to do it in 1918, but there was no steel because of the war. So he waited another year. He didn't tell Duesenberry. He was trying to get rid of Duesenberry. He waited a year, and in 1919, he approached him to buy him out, and Duesenberry got a lawyer, and Mueller ended up paying, he thought he would pay about $25,000 for Duesenberry's part of the business. He ended up having to spend $52,000, so he was very sorry he hadn't signed the patent with Duesenberry at that point. The only money he ever borrowed was when he had to pay off Duesenberry. At that point, he decides to phase out his electrical sales business that he had been doing for so many years. He bought a lot in Cleveland, a whole city block full of old houses, which he demolished. He was not a preservationist, apparently. And he built his first factory in 1921. This is the insignia over the door of the very first part of the factory. He added on to this factory many, many times, like probably 5 times in the years that he ran the company. These are some of the clips that he and Duesenberry worked on, and they actually patented. You can see number 2 down here in the lower right corner. They patented that, and the one with the insulator on it, which was actually a nipple that he bought at a feed store for feeding baby goats. And they modified it in the factory and put it over the clip. So this is what the earliest versions of the clip looked like, a much smaller, less like an alligator and more like a piranha maybe. The teeth are shorter. This was the factory. This is after Mueller Electric had a few additions. The original building would be that 2-story one on the left, and it was just the first floor. Then he added a second floor. Then he added the building on the, what would be our right side. Then the stuff at the back. It went on every 5-10 years. He would add to his building on North 31st Street, close to downtown Cleveland. He located it there because the steel company it was a metal works, and they manufactured the actual clips. And then he had many women who he employed that put the clips together in his factory. Once it got to be this size, he moved manufacturing into his facility. It saved him money. They weren't moving things around. They weren't paying a second party to do the manufacturing. So this building is still standing on North 31st Street in downtown Cleveland, and it's now on the historic register. It was put on the register in 2016. they diversified clip-wise. They didn't manufacture anything but clips, but they were known for their clips. They would get requests from customers about, can you make me a bigger clip? Can you make me a specialized clip? Jumper cables. If you look at these, you'll start recognizing many of them. They didn't just sell alligator clips, although that was always sort of their bread and butter. But those big red ones they called the Big Brute, and those became jumper cables eventually. The automotive industry started to become a major client because car manufacturers needed clips for different functions. He was open to these suggestions, and he always was looking for a new avenue to make money. He wasn't really greedy. He was a businessman, but he was always willing to think outside the box and come up with something new. Here's Ralph in his later years. This would have been taken around the time he was working with UNL as a benefactor. This should be a familiar person to a few of you anyway. When Mueller was casting around for we'll go back to Ralph. He was casting around he was about 70. He made a pile of money in World War II. The military was a huge customer. Every branch of the military ordered clips from them. The Navy in particular used a lot of clips. Every soldier in the Navy had a life vest with a clip on it that held a flashlight that pointed up. So if you got knocked off a boat, you would turn on your flashlight. It would point up. It was held with a Mueller clip. But the stories of how the clips were used during the war are endless. And I think he made more money than he dreamed possible. Hundreds of thousands of clips were sold to the government during the war years. So after the war, he's in his late 60s. He's ready to turn the company over to his son and his son-in-law. And he had always been a very, very loyal alum. He came to every reunion. He attended football games. He communicated with chancellors. And in 1946, a man named Reuben Gustafson came to Lincoln to serve as chancellor. And Gustafson was a very smart, very engaging person, and he worked well with people. His predecessor was the opposite and was a very standoffish person. So Gus came to town, as he was known, and he immediately wanted to know who are our alums that can help us out, because the state can't do everything. So he went to Cleveland to visit Mueller, had a tour of the factory, and I think he realized this is somebody who can do something for us with his wealth and his interest in the university. So they kept up a correspondence for pretty regularly, like every few months after Gustafson visited him. And he let Gustafson know that he was interested in making a gift to the university, but he wanted it to involve electricity, and he just wasn't sure what that could be. And I want to read you a little. He also kept a diary. He wrote an autobiography. He's a really easy person to research. But in his diary in January 1948, he wrote, "Chancellor Gustafson has been in contact with me about my gift to the university. He would like me to provide money for another classroom building. However, I am not interested in relieving the state of the responsibility of providing functional buildings for the university. But rather, I want to give something extra to the University of Nebraska, preferably a gift that has a Cornhusker aura about it." So then, more letters are exchanged. And then in June, he writes, "I have found a way to incorporate electronics into my gift to the university. I will be giving a financial gift of $90,000 for a bell tower that makes music electronically to be built on campus. The bell tower will hold Carillon bells, reeds about the size of a lead pencil that will be struck electronically by electronically operated hammers. The vibrations are picked up electronically, amplified literally 1,000,000 times, then carried up the tower to be broadcast from 8 stentors. I assume those are speakers. I would especially like for the bell tower to be designed as a giant ear of corn. So with that idea in mind, the Chancellor, Gus, and Linus Burr Smith cooked up a plan to have senior architecture students, as their final project, enter into a competition with each other to design a Carillon tower, and then Mueller got to choose the winner. So Burr Smith was chairman of architecture for many years, probably 30 years. And after World War II, the university was the physical plant was a mess. There was massive enrollment out there on the horizon from the returning GIs, but the buildings at the university had not been, well, nothing new had been built since 1930, and that was a little bit of a miracle in itself. But even maintenance and things like that were put off because first there was no money, then there were no materials, bricks, steel, you name it, it was hard to get during the war. So Burr Smith was put in charge of a campus rebuilding committee, probably when Gustafson got there. And he continued in that capacity into the 1950s. And there are still a few of the buildings that were constructed during this period on campus, including the administration building. Most of them were very modernist. Burr Smith was the last person in the world who would allow an ear of corn Carillon tower to be built on campus. So I think he steered his students away from that, but told them to incorporate this element of corn. So he selected a young man. Mueller got the 10 drawings and plans, and he selected a tower designed by George Kushka, who was a senior in that class, who was working. He graduated. He submitted the plans, graduated. His design was chosen. He was still in Lincoln working for McGinnis and Schomburg. And this plaque is on the south side of the tower even today. There's a door and the plaque is on the door. Maybe not right now, but it will be. Here's a picture of George. George was from Kansas, and he left Lincoln and went to Salinas, California, and spent his career there. And this is his family in Colby, Kansas, where there's it appears to be a family museum for the Kushkas. He's in the center of the back. So I'm sure this was very thrilling for George Kushka, and he got paid $100 by Mueller. This is the plaque on the north side of the tower that faces the mall, and on it, Mueller clearly states, in grateful appreciation of the free education given him by the state of Nebraska. So that free education kind of paid off for the university as the years passed. Here's the tower, and you can see each one of these designs did have to include some kind of a corn motif because that was part of the competition. And Kushka did the sort of Art Deco corn around, it is very Art Deco actually, around the top of the octagonal tower, which is constructed in limestone. The rest of the campus was brick. Davis and Wilson were building, they had built many, many things on campus. They were getting back into getting some work on campus. After Mueller chose Kushka's design, it was sent to, well, I can read you that too. It was sent to Davis Design just because they were sort of the usual campus architects, and they immediately tried to redesign it in brick and make it look Georgian, like Love Library and some of the other buildings that were going up at that time. This is what Mueller writes in his diary. The university took Kushka's design to the architecture firm of Davis and Wilson. The architect's doing most of the work on campus now. However, they wished to convert the design to Georgian style. I was not pleased with the outcome, so the university is now taking the design to the firm of McGinnis and Schomburg. George Kushka works at this firm and now can become involved in the refining of his design. So that's why our tower is maybe a little more modern looking, a little less traditional, made of limestone instead of brick, all of that. The tower, this all happened, the gift was made in, well, the students of 1948 designed did the design competition. The tower was constructed during 48-49 and dedicated at homecoming, November 4th, 1949. And Burr Smith was in charge of the festivities surrounding the tower and its dedication. Mueller brought his children, his grandchildren. There were many local people there. The chancellor, of course, and some regents, and he was very flattered and very honored. And then they had a 30-minute recital of music from the tower. The tower is set up so that you can play music on a keyboard. The university has it on kind of a tape, but you can you can manually play a song if you know how. So Mueller went on after the tower was dedicated he set up a health museum in Morrill Hall that many students would walk through, not just UNL students, but school kids when they'd go to visit Morrill Hall. And it was about different human body functions, like the development of a fetus was one of them, and some other things, the models where a body's cut in half so you can see the organs. And that was very popular. A lot of people attended it, and I think parts of it are probably still in Morrill Hall. And then in 1957, the Mueller Planetarium opened, which he was also very proud of, although it's not a separate building, it's within the museum. He also gave a Carillon Tower and a health museum and a planetarium to the university near him in Cleveland, which I think was Case Western, but I'm not absolutely positive about that. So he had his themes: towers, museums, planetariums. Mueller lived until he was 88, and sadly died by suicide when he was 88 years old. And that story is kind of mysterious. But he lived a long life and was very successful. And here we have some shots of the octagonal tower. The one on the left is looking north. You can see the old facade of Love Library back in the distance before the Love North addition was added to it. And the one on the right that's the Coliseum in the background. This gives you an idea of where it sits on campus. This photo is from probably the 1950s or 60s. The parking in the middle of campus didn't stop until the early 70s. Parking has been an ongoing issue at the university since the first brick was laid, pretty much. And there is a modern view of it looking north between the Richard Serra sculpture Green Point, which is located between the library and the tower and kind of nicely frames the tower. So with that, I think I'll quit so that Vance has time to tell us how this building is being renovated. The tower was starting to lose its pieces, and you can tell us how you're going to fix that. There's that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Switch PowerPoints here. Hi, like I was introduced, my name is Vance Behrens. I was born and raised in Illinois, and I got recruited to play football here back in 1983, and so that's what got me to Nebraska, and I have stayed here ever since. So I walked past this tower many, many times over my 7 years of college. Okay, thank you. So, I think things happened a little quicker back in the day because we started working on this in November of 2015. You know, the tower was probably constructed in less than 2 years.
Not even.
I've got a lot of slides. I think I do. There we go. You're going to see this slide 100 times. So usually when we go out and look at projects, we're like, we should have taken more pictures. And so I think I've got most of the pictures in here. But we were first asked in November of 2015 to come out and look at some of the problems with the tower and see how they needed to be addressed and what kind of means and methods were going to have to be implemented to restore the tower. As you can see, there's pieces of the tower that were cracking and spalling off. Like I said, I've got hundreds of pictures of these. So every situation we looked at, it was kind of a little half moon that popped off of the top of the stones. Some of these photos, the light's a lot better and it's easier to see. So our first look was then, and nothing really happened for a couple years. In July of 2016, we actually had a contractor come in and remove a couple of pieces to see if we could ascertain the source of the problem and get a little better understanding of how the tower was constructed. Unfortunately, there was no construction documents that we could find. I'm guessing there had to be some at some time, but we talked to Davis Design. They didn't have anything available. The university didn't have anything available. So we were kind of starting from scratch. So back in 2016, we removed a couple pieces, and I'm going to go through a lot of these slides pretty quickly here. This was just getting the lift out there so we could. Coincidentally, this tower is constructed over the top of an active steam tunnel, and I'm not sure which came first, the steam tunnel or the tower. There you can see some more of those spalls. We counted 50 to 60 of them at the time, and here's one that's a little more dramatic. Here's a situation where it's cracked and it hasn't fallen yet. There's a condition where a lot of them have fallen. So like I said, there were 50 or 60 at the time of this observation. And then it wasn't until 2017 that we issued a report. I think some of that was not knowing what to do, not knowing how much money it was going to cost, not knowing where the money to fix it was going to come from. So oddly enough, when this report came out, we got an opinion of probable cost from a couple contractors, and we took the high number, which was about $140,000. So then the question was, do we fix the stones that are broken, and then what happens if more stones break? So Kay talked about wanting to have some brick in this tower. The tower is constructed with 3 withes of masonry, so that's 3 layers of masonry. And it doesn't step, or it's the same all the way from top to bottom, but a lot of brick laid. This is a view from the top looking down. The contractors really enjoy walking up and down those stairs. It's not much of a stair, it's more of a ladder. But it does have a handrail. I've been up and down it a few times. I could use a few more. So brickwork was quite good on the inside. So when we removed the stone, we discovered that our opinion in the onset was that each stone was 4 inches wide, and it was laid up with the brick, and then they had some kind of a stone anchor at the top of the stone, and we figured that stone anchor was corroding. We didn't realize that the back of the stones were buttered and with mortar, and they were adhered to the face of the brick. So here you can see an anchor at the top of that breakout there. We worked down low. It was a lot easier to do stuff down low.
Vance, what were the anchors? Were they galvanized steel, bare steel?
They were bare steel. So you can see the corrosion kind of on the surface of that breakout there. And so what happens when steel corrodes? It can expand to about 10 to 12 times its original size if it fully corrodes. So these were probably an 1/8 inch thick anchors, and once they begin to corrode, they start to delaminate, and that delamination causes expansion, and then that expansion causes these tensile forces in the stone, and when that gets too tight, there's too much pressure, and it starts popping the stone off. So these stones had a little saw kerf on the top of each stone where that turned down anchor, and I'll get a better picture of some of the anchors here. You can see that anchor is turned down, and it turns down about 3/4 of an inch, but just enough to hold the stone. There's a better picture. So that was a typical anchor. So how do we solve this problem? How much worse is it going to get? So one of the ideas we had was, instead of taking off all the stone, do we use some cathodic protection? And Mueller would have loved cathodic protection because it consists of wiring each anchor together and creating a whole circuit, and then you change the charge on the electricity, and it will resist corrosion. He would have loved it. We thought about it. The difficult part with cathodic protection is, if that circuit ever breaks, it all goes to heck. So it would have entailed routing out every mortar joint, connecting a wire to every one of these anchors, and then putting an electrical charge in that. It's also very costly. Another solution we had was to do a little chemical injection to prevent corrosion from continuing. That would consist of drilling holes in the mortar joints and injecting a corrosion inhibitor. Used that in the past, and if it ever leaks out on the stone, you get a bad stain. A lot of times it can leach out onto the surface of the stone. So that was eventually ruled out as well. Some more stone anchor pictures. We're not sure when it happened, but at some point there's some corrosion staining on that spall there again. They caulked the mortar joints with it was an asbestos product, and we believe that part of the problem was it started locking in the moisture. So limestone, like concrete, is a very porous material, and it's actually a big sponge, and it'll soak in water. You need to let it get out, and we believe that part of that asbestos caulking was locking the moisture in the system and then causing the corrosion of the anchors. So it was in in 2021, we finally got the go-ahead from the university to start looking at a final design. And so we began working on drawings and talking to contractors and masonry tradespeople on how to make the repairs. In March of '24, we finally issued a set of drawings and specifications to restore the tower. So Chem Contractors out of Omaha was engaged by the university to work on the project. And in April 1st of 2025, Chem started kind of mapping out the stones. And the idea was we're going to take all these 4-inch stones off, catalog them, lay them to the side, replace ones that were broken or cracked, and get an inventory of all of those, and then come back in, cut off the existing iron anchors and put in a stainless steel anchor and lay the stone back up again. So April 1st of 2025, Chem went to work on this. They cataloged all these. Crane arrived in late May of 2025. That was some of the cataloging we did. And the crane worked to set up this hydrolift. So instead of setting up scaffolding, they decided to use this hydrolift that would raise up and down to perform all the masonry work that had to be done. I don't usually talk this much, so. The other thought we had was with the hydrolift was maybe we could encapsulate this and be able to work through the winter. That was quickly dispatched. They said you could never raise and lower it if you tented around that. So, in order to prevent having to make connections to the limestone, they decided to core through the tower to install the hydrolift. So here's, of course, they were anchoring to some of the stones that were going to be replaced anyways. This is the process of coring through and getting their rods to secure the hydrolift so they could raise it up and down. So upon removal of the stone, it was discovered that it wasn't all 4-inch limestone. There were pieces around, like the belfry grills that were 7 inches thick. And then there were a lot of pieces, like the larger ones you see here, that were 9 inches thick. So these were laid up integral with the masonry, and they didn't have any anchors in them. So we didn't see any problems with this 9-inch stone, but it was something we weren't expecting. There's a pile of cores through the tower. So Chem had engaged Vetter out of Mankato, Minnesota to produce the limestone. Vetter in turn shopped it out to a company in Missouri called Earthworks. So this is down at Earthworks, where they've got a little saw that cuts limestone. The specifications called out for the limestone to be quarried out of one of 3 counties in south central Indiana, Lawrence, Owen, or Monroe counties. And that was believed to be where the original limestone came from. So Earthworks, I think we got 4 different submittals until there was a selection that was approved. So we went back and forth several times with Earthworks. Vetter out of Mankato produced all the shop drawings to make the stone, and subsequently they sent the shop drawings down to Earthworks, and Earthworks cut the stone. This is the stone cap consists of 16 separate stones. These are 5 inches thick, and once again there was a caulk, which usually we don't mind it in the top of a structure. It's just on the sides where the moisture wants to wick out that we don't like to encapsulate. Here's a photo of the hydrolift up in a higher position. Quite a bit of the work has been done at this point in time. A lot of scaffolding shots. So we get to the corn cob, or the corn entablature, and you can see the corrosion that on the surface of those anchors that are anchoring the top of the entablature stones. And you can also see what it's doing to those stones. It's expanding and then cracking and eventually spalling those out. Back in the day, these were all hand chiseled. Today, they're being cut on a CNC machine. So I know Earthworks has had a little problem with their tooling. I think they've just got it fixed, so they're a little behind on the reproduction of these pieces. But I believe there's 16 of these stones that are being replaced. Just a little documentation by Chem of what's going on what stones. You can see how intricate those were, and yeah, it probably took some time to get those chiseled out by hand. They're a little over 3 feet in height. That's a pretty good shot of kind of the negative of those that they used to produce, feed into their CNC machine. Once again, you can see corrosion developing on those anchors. There's a pretty good crack developing there. There's the corner pieces. I think I'm going to put one of the old ones in my office. So all of the iron had lead paint. So Bachman joined the project to abate all the lead paint. All the grills on the Carillon at the Belfry had lead paint, so that was being abated as well, in addition to the asbestos in the caulk that was found. They just have some flashing there to protect things, to keep water from getting in the system during construction, but we did not introduce any kind of flashing or anything like that in the reconstruction. So basically, we decided to put the tower back together the way it was originally constructed, with the exception of the iron anchors. We're going back in with the stainless steel anchors. Other than that, it was decided that everything is going to be the same.
So Vance, do you feel like the anchors were sort of the source of most of the problems?
Yes. Yes, it was pretty conclusive that the anchors were causing the problem. So prior to embedding these back in the mortar, we've got a thorough sealer that we're putting on the back side of the units. It doesn't inhibit the adhesion or anything with the mortar, but we thought we'll try and keep moisture from getting back behind there from the surface of the stone. We also decided, or the university also decided, to kind of reconstruct the platform of the belfry. I always thought there were bells in there, and I didn't know until we started this project that they were always speakers. I thought surely back in the day they used real bells. This is kind of the surface of the belfry, which it's just a built-up roofing material, and we're going to go back in with the same thing. We've got a bronze screen to put on the back side of the grills to keep birds and other things out.
How tall is the tower and how many total stones?
So the tower is just over 80 feet in height. I think at the base it is 17 feet across. I got some more facts and figures for you here. I'll get to a slide. Contractor framed a good picture there. So the total number of stones on the tower were 1,745. Approximately 299 were not removed. Other than that, all of the stones were removed. The ones that were not removed were primarily the 9-inch thick stones, and then a lot of the stones that were around the grills up at the belfry. The original base bid was to include the replacement of 78 stones. After further investigation and during construction, that number increased by 227. So there was almost 300 new stones replaced. The stones that were 7-inch deep that remained there were 36 of those, and there were 124 of the 9-inch thick stones. The roof comprised of 17 stone caps, and that corn entablature, there were 16 of those. So I gave you the $140,000 opinion of probable cost about 10 years ago. The project contract value with chem contractors was $1.28 million. Probably a little bit more than it cost to build the tower. And then there was a change order in the amount of $600,000 for additional stones that had to be replaced, removing the speakers and replacing them, removing the wood planking and replacing that platform at the belfry. So final contract value ended up being $1.88 million. They are planning on completion in sometime in May of this year, with final washdown and that kind of stuff being completed at the end of May, and they think they're going to be out of there by around the 1st of June. Yes, sir.
Did you use any cleaning pulls on the exterior, like masonry or art mundi or that sort of thing, for cleaning the limestone?
There is going to be some cleaning of the limestone. We talked about putting a sealer on, and apparently for historic preservation, they don't allow any sealers. So we had spec'd a sealer originally, but we pulled that out of the contract documents after historic preservation said no sealers. So
The reason for there was no membrane in the cap to start with, and you didn't put one back.
No.
What was the flashing that was shown there? What was the material?
it was a copper.
It was copper.
Yes.
So you had a sheet skin you pulled off the surface
Yes.
that you installed. So you reinstalled it with a copper membrane, essentially.
Yes.
Flashed it basically down the face of it.
Yes.
Was there any backer to the tower? Did the walls slope in at all?
Very little. I don't think much at all, really. By the time we got up there and sighted down it.
I wondered if the corners were vertical and the inset panels were perhaps battered and tapered in a little bit.
It didn't appear to be. Yes.
So, the stone you said was adhered to the brick. So were those easy to come off, that you were able to save a lot of stone?
Yeah, especially once they got a couple of them off, you can get back behind there and tap a few times and pry those loose.
But now you're saying that there's a space there between them, right?
No, we decided to butter the back of them up again, and yes, and secure them back to the.
You don't really have any records from the construction era.
No.
I always find it amazing that, especially a tower as large as this tower is, it's a relatively small masonry project.
Yes.
I'm surprised they didn't do masonry bond throughout the entire thing, and the problems you're having right now would have been reduced greatly.
I agree.
Number two, a caution I would have with respect to the red brick backup. It sounds like it's 2 wides of brick plus
It's
the.
three wides.
3 wides
Yes.
of brick plus the, so you're looking at about a 16 or 18 inch.
16, 17-inch wall plus the limestone.
I would caution you, the experience on the Capitol was when that red brick gets wet, it is a sponge. And once it gets wet, freeze thaw just shatters it into a bazillion pieces. And I saw efflorescence on the interior face of the brick on some of the corners and various sorts of places. Have the university really stay on top of that, because you don't really want that brick backup starting to fall apart.
Right, that's why we paid special attention to that roofing material and that kind of thing that's going inside the belfry.
Boy, it's disastrous.
Yes.
We had to completely disassemble walls that had shattered brick behind them. It's just bad news.
Yep, freeze thaw is not good.
The only other observation I would make is, I always wanted to ask this, if I had some people from the 1920s sitting in the room with me who were detailing masonry walls, I would have said to them, why on earth didn't you put your anchors in the side of the stone, in the head joints, instead of in the bed joints? Let gravity work for you as opposed to against you.
Right.
I don't have them to ask, but I'd like to ask that question.
Any other questions?
Wrap up for us. We have no
Okay.
people coming in.